Today we'll be talking about etiquette in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. The novel, Pride and Prejudice, is set during the Regency era. During that time, as during many other times in England, having manners and etiquette was just as important as being educated, maybe more so. It was extremely important that you followed the rules and customs of behavior. This is known as etiquette. If you did these things, people would think well of you, most of the time. Your etiquette and manners defined you. Often, people could tell how wealthy you were, depending on how you acted.
You see that gentleman there? Lady Lucas has just told me he's Mr. Bingley's oldest friend. His name is Darcy, and he has a mighty fortune and a great estate in Derbyshire. Bingley's wealth is nothing to his. 10,000 a year at least. Don't you think he's the handsomest man you've ever seen, girls?
I wonder if he'd be quite so handsome if he was not quite so rich.
It was important to note that poor manners and etiquette could also reflect badly on your family. People might see you and your family differently because of that.
Well, you have a sweet room here.
In this scene, Mrs. Bennet embarrasses the Bennet sisters, especially Elizabeth, because of her behavior and when she insults Darcy.
You don't find the society somewhat confined and unvarying for your taste?
Confined and unvarying, indeed it is not, sir. The country is a vast deal pleasanter than town, whatever you may say about it.
Not only is Elizabeth embarrassed, but the Bingley sisters react and show that they think this behavior is undignified.
We dine with 24 families.
There were many rules that people followed. For example, you would stand up if someone entered a room or you were being introduced to someone. If you wanted to leave, you asked for permission to be excused. Of course, it was always granted as well. That was polite too.
Pray, excuse me, Mom.
And people were paying attention. If you forgot to bow or curtsy to someone in greeting, you might find that people gossiped about you. Or worse, they wouldn't invite you to their parties anymore. You might even offend someone. It might mean for women that people didn't consider them good choices to marry. And your manners would affect your family. If you behaved badly, people would think that everyone in your family was poorly mannered as well.
But Jane Bennet is a sweet girl. It's very sad she should have such an unfortunate family, such low connections.
The uncle, she told us, is in trade and lives in Cheapside.
Well, perhaps we should call when we are next in town.
It was important to hide your emotions. If you were polite, instead of telling someone that you didn't like them, you had to hint around it. Maybe you hid it completely. It was very complicated. This is why Elizabeth suspects that Caroline Bingley and Mrs. Hurst don't really want her to play cards with them when they invite her to in Chapter 8.
Will you join us, Miss Bennet?
I thank you, no.
You prefer reading to cards, do you? Singular.
Miss Bennet despises cards. She's a great reader and has no pleasure in anything else. I deserve neither such praise nor such censure. I am not a great reader and take pleasure in many things.
She doesn't trust them since they are technically superior to her and her family, and she thinks that they are really condescending to her or being fake. Also, people would usually try to assume the best about a situation or person, a lot like Jane often does. No one wanted to just assume someone was lying or stealing or being improper. And finally, you didn't usually say how you felt. You would tell people all was well, even if it wasn't. Maybe especially if it wasn't. For example, in Chapter 10, Darcy is writing a letter, but Caroline Bingley is all over him, constantly interrupting him to tell him how nicely he writes or how wonderfully long his letters are and so forth. She also asks him to give her regards to his sister, to whom he is writing. She is seriously annoying him. However, he doesn't tell her so. He says something else that actually kind of sounds nice, so that she'll stop asking.
Tell your sister I am delighted to hear of her improvement on the harp, and pray let her know that I am quite in raptures with her beautiful little design for a table, and I think it infinitely superior to Miss Grantley's. Will you give me leave to defer your raptures till I write again? At present I have not room to do them justice.
Manners were important to women if they wanted to get married. Since it was a patriarchal society, which is where the men run everything and they have all the rights and abilities, women pretty much had to get married, or they had to have some other male relative take care of them. Women were not allowed to own property. A patriarchal society for women was a very unfair situation. Women were basically property themselves, and therefore they needed a man, could be a husband or some other male relative, to see that they were taken care of. So mothers had to train their daughters to behave appropriately. Women needed to be accomplished, which meant that they knew how to sing, dance, converse, and had good manners, as well as other artistic skills.
Do you play, Miss Bennet?
Aye, but very ill indeed.
But all young ladies are accomplished. They sing, they draw, they dance, speak French and German, cover screens and I know not what.
There are not half a dozen who would satisfy my notion of an accomplished woman.
Oh, certainly. No woman can be really esteemed accomplished who does not also possess a certain something in her air, in the manner of walking, in the tone of her voice, her address and expressions.
So if a young lady could do most or all of these things, she was considered accomplished. Of course, people would often call a girl accomplished, even if she wasn't quite good at all of these things. Some things, like having a certain something in your air, were not very definable, obviously. But it meant that she was pleasant to be around, seemed self-contained, that she liked you but didn't need you maybe. And also you did have to watch your facial expressions. Don't make faces that were improper or unpleasant. Men had things a bit easier, but there were still rules. Being polite to the ladies was important. Open doors, help them step in and out of carriages, carry heavy things, etc. These rules are still around us today. But there were other rules, such as not talking to someone above you, that is, of a higher social class, unless they had spoken first.
Lizzie, look.
Green boughs
They've been introduced. Can we not prevent him?
Too late.
Mr. Darcy, I have made a remarkable, I must say, an amazing discovery. I understand that you are the nephew of Lady Catherine de Bourgh of Rosings Park.
I'm glad to hear it. Yes. What is your name, sir?
My name is William Collins, Mr. Darcy, and I am very great honor. Well,
Or you had to wait to have people in the neighborhood to visit you when you are new before you can visit them.
My dear, Mr. Bennet, wonderful news! Netherfield Park is let at last.
Is it?
Yes, it is. Why, then it is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England. A single man of large fortune, my dear. His name is Bingley, and he will be in possession by Michaelmas, and he has 5,000 a year.
So that is his design in settling here, to marry one of our daughters.
Design? Oh, how can you talk such nonsense? But you know he may very likely fall in love with one of them. Therefore, you must visit him directly he comes.
Visit him? Oh, no, I see no occasion for that.
Oh, Mr. Bennet!
Go yourself with the girls. Or, still better, send them by themselves.
By themselves?
Aye, for you're as handsome as any of them, Mr. Bingley might like you best to the party.
Looking good was as important then as it is now. But the rules were different. You had to get dressed before you came down to a meal, and dinners were usually in formal clothing. And you didn't come down to breakfast in pajamas. Make sure your clothes were modest and didn't show off too much. Do your hair correctly, too, for both men and women. Talking was a big deal. Imagine a world without TV or cell phones, no movies even. Maybe you could go to a play, but mostly entertainment was found in conversation. You needed to be able to talk to people and do it well. It was common for the upper class to have days consisting of travel to one house or another to talk with the people that lived there. You'd have lunch, play cards, or just sit and discuss things. Then there were dinners and balls. Balls were very important so that young people could socialize and meet potential mates. Since you couldn't spend a lot of time alone with the opposite sex, you had to do your flirting in public at the balls and parties. If you weren't seen as a good social companion, it might be hard to get invited to the next dance. For women, that could be disastrous.